Hello, my name is Chagazi Kemka, and today I'm going to be presenting on my practicum project, which is titled Assessing the Effectiveness of Different Nutrition Education and Programming on Long-Term Health Outcomes in Refugee Populations within the United States. If we go here to slide 1, I wanted to provide a little bit of background information on the refugee situation currently worldwide. Today in 2018, the world is actually seeing the most displaced people that it has ever seen. The number of refugees have increased dramatically in the past decades as conflicts throughout the world continue to rise. Currently, 68.5 million people are forcibly displaced worldwide. 40 million of those people are internally displaced, with 25.4 million of those people being active refugees. And there are a number of reasons why people are forced to flee their home countries, and that can include religious, social, national, racial, or political persecution, in addition to war, gender or sexual orientation, hunger, or climate change. New displacement remains high today. Currently, one person displaced every 2 seconds, which is less time than it takes to read this sentence. So that equates to about 30 people who are newly displaced every minute. In addition, 44,400 people a day are forced to flee their homes because of conflict or persecution. And one in about every 110 people globally are either an asylum seeker, internally displaced, or a refugee. Currently, 85% of the refugees are being hosted in developed countries. The top 3 countries for hosting refugees include Turkey, which has about 3.5 million refugees, Uganda, which has about 1.4 million refugees, and Pakistan, which has about 1.4 million refugees. 57%, which is more than half of the refugees, come from 3 countries. Those countries are South Sudan, which currently has about 2.4 million refugees throughout the world. Afghanistan has led to about 2.6 million refugees around the world. And then Syria, which has had a lot of conflicts in recent years, currently has 6.3 million refugees around the world. If we move on to the next slide, this summer I had the opportunity to intern at the International Rescue Committee, otherwise known as the IRC. The IRC is a nonprofit organization that provides emergency relief, protection, and resettlement services for refugees around the world, including in the United States. And their services range from housing, social justice services, education, English language courses, employment, health and wellness, and nutrition. Domestically, the IRC has about 29 offices throughout the United States that ensure that refugees have food, shelter, and clothing, and work upon their arrival in order to help them be self-sufficient. The IRC, one of the main goals of the IRC is to be able to provide self-sufficiency to refugees. So they provide these resources to refugees usually about 6 months to a year upon their arrival. And these resources steadily decrease in order to allow the refugees time to become dependent solely on themselves. Some statistics about the IRC: in 2017 alone, the IRC and its global partners helped about 23 million people around the world access primary health care. In addition, they provided cash and asset transfers to 179,499 households of refugees and vulnerable populations. Last year, they were able to provide about 1.14 million children schooling and other education opportunities, in addition to helping create and support around 16,000 businesses, of which about 73% of those were female-owned. Last year, the IRC was also able to reach about 2 million people affected by the hunger crisis in East Africa, Nigeria, and Yemen. The New Roots Division of the IRC is an initiative that helps support nutrition, food security, and food production activities in refugees. So some of the tasks of the IRC division is to deliver nutrition and educational models. The IRC does have its own community garden in which refugees can participate, but the New Roots Division also helps to manage gardening activities and refugees throughout their own communities. The New Roots Division is also responsible for overseeing cultural orientation of refugees upon their arrival for nutrition-related tasks, which includes grocery shopping. The New Roots Division also manages garden clubs at local high schools and provides healthy cooking demonstrations. Some statistics on the Atlanta's New Roots Division is last year they were able to serve over 200 youth in food and garden-based after-school programs, and the garden club at Clarkson High School currently has about 100 participants, and through that program, they are able to supply 27 stipend-based internships in food youth justice every year. Last year alone, the Food Corps member of the New Roots Division provided nutrition and garden education to over 1,000 elementary and high school students. At the IRC, I had the opportunity to gain experience in a number of roles, which included updating and creating materials for resource availability and education initiatives. So this included providing and creating handouts for refugees on local food pantries, food services, pamphlets on SNAP, in addition to creating the material for the cultural orientation, which is a summary presentation for refugees upon their arrival, which pretty much tells them how to navigate the food system in the United States. So things such as where to buy food, how to buy food, where to buy healthy food, how to sign up for the SNAP program and things as that. We also did a grocery store cultural orientation for the adult education group, which is pretty important because a lot of these refugees have never been to grocery stores such as the ones here. And so it's very important that they are able to navigate the system. We also did healthy cooking demonstrations, and then I was also involved in researching grants and fundings for the New Roots Division. Some background information on my project. When refugees enter into the United States, they are at a higher risk for chronic disease and physical inactivity than the general population. A lot of times this is due to lack of information and limited cultural competency of how to navigate throughout systems within the United States. And a lot of times when these refugees do enter into the U.S., they adopt unhealthy American lifestyle habits, such as being inactive or eating fast food, unhealthy food, which typically tends to be cheaper. So many incoming refugees have micronutrient deficiencies that can lead to long-term cognitive and developmental delays and other serious illnesses. So one common nutrition-related health issue is anemia, and anemia is actually the highest nutrient deficiency throughout the world. And in some refugees camps, anemia has been found to be as high as 54 to 85% in children in refugee camps. Another common deficiency is a vitamin D deficiency. This one is seen a lot in women who wear long-sleeved veiled clothing for religious or cultural purposes. And within these populations, the vitamin deficiency has been seen as high as 80%. In addition to undernutrition, overnutrition is also common. So refugees, especially youth refugees, are found to have higher rates of overweight and obesity than their counterparts. And this can lead to chronic diseases in the future, such as increased chances of being overweight as an adult, increased chances of developing hypertension, diabetes, and high cholesterol. Unfortunately, there is limited information available on nutrition education to refugee populations and the best methods in which to disseminate this information. And because of that, it is really important that we find information and research how we can put out this information to these refugees. And so the study that I did aimed to assess the effectiveness of different nutrition education programs and methodologies. If we move on to slide 7, I outline my methods. So for this project, I did a systematic literature search of a couple of databases, including PubMed, PLOS One, and NCBI. And some of the keywords that I used in my search included nutrition education, nutrition health, diet, and refugee. And so some inclusion factors The articles did have to be recent. They had to be focused on nutrition, so they could measure other outcomes such as physical activity, mental health, but nutrition did have to be the main focus. The intervention also did have to center on refugees or recent immigrants into the United States with no specific emphasis on demographics or immigrant population. So for example, they couldn't have surveyed just Syrian refugees. They were also required to report a measurable nutrition-related outcome, such as changes in eating behaviors, nutrition-related health outcomes, such as weight, blood pressure, that sort of thing. Some of the inclusion criteria were if the articles did not report any short or long-term measurable nutrition-related education or health outcomes. In addition, if the studies were focused on weight loss or disease management, or if there was an emphasis on a specific demographic within the population. Continuing on this slide, I was able to find 3 different articles. And so one of the main things that I wanted in these articles was I wanted to find articles in which the study designs provided a unique component, something that was different that I can compare to others. So the first article is titled Integration of Nutrition Education Classes into English as a Second Language class for refugees. The second is Healthy Immigrant Families, Randomized Controlled Trial of a Family-Based Nutrition and Physical Education Intervention. And the last one is Community Gardens for Refugee and Immigrant Communities as a Means for Health Promotion. So the first study integrated nutrition education into English as a second language course. And so this study took place over the course of 12 weeks with 1 hour of instruction every week. And it took place within a worksite training program, training center for refugees. So this study used a food frequency survey to track changes in dietary intake. And in the end, there was no significant change or increase in fruit and vegetable intake, as well as whole grains or refined grains, but there was a decrease in meat, dairy, and fat intake. Study 2 paired physical activity modules with nutrition education modules. This study also took place over 12 weeks with 60 to 90 minutes of instruction every week, but this study did take place within the participants' homes, and so they were required to track their diet as well as wear accelerometers to measure physical activity. So this study was able to show reduction in calories from fat, carbs, added sugars, and alcoholic beverages, and although there was an increase in greens and beans, there also was no significant increase in fruit and vegetable intake. In addition, there was no increase in physical activity throughout the duration of the study. Study 3 took place at community gardens at local churches where participation was elective, but educational information was disseminated each week at the garden. The study did show an increase in secondary measures, including improved mental health, in addition to showing an 8% increase in fruit and vegetable intake. So the results were standardized and compared. So as you can see in graph 2, study 1 did show the highest increase in fruit and vegetable intake, which was a common measure between all 3 studies. So study 1 had about 0.5 serving size of increase in fruits and vegetables, where study 2 and study 3 rounded out at about a little under 0.1 increase in serving intake. However, study 2 showed to have the highest positive overall change in dietary habits, which means that they had the highest increase in positive and healthy servings throughout the remainder throughout the duration of the study, with about 0.9 increase in healthy servings, followed by study 1, which rounded out at about just under 0.8, and then study 3, which rounded out at under 0.1. Compliance is very important in interventions that are looking to provoke behavioral changes, and so I decided to compare the compliance rates of all 3 studies. Study 1 had a 50% compliance rate. Study 2 was almost 100% at 98% completion of their study, while study 3 had about 44% rate of completion. So if we move on to slide 10, study 2 did report to have the highest compliance rates in addition to the highest increase in overall healthy servings intakes, although study 1 did yield the highest increase in fruit and vegetable servings. And so because of that, I do think that study 2 did prove to have the better intervention program, and that could be due to a number of things. I hypothesize that one reason could be the ease of convenience of the intervention. So study 2 was the physical education and nutrition program, which took place within the participants' homes. So they didn't have to go anywhere. Whereas in study 1, they had to go to the worksite office. And in study 3 was elective. They had to go to the garden. In addition, studies have shown that influencing one healthy behavior does cause positive changes in another. So the fact that they were encouraging physical activity likely encouraged the participants to also help improve their nutrition or vice versa. Some suggestions that I would have in the future, I think it would help increase the data's validity to include studies with similar recruitment measures and measurable outcomes because of the way that the studies were recruited for. For example, study 3 was fully elective. That could influence things such as compliance rate. Also finding measurable outcomes that are similar, that way it would help with standardizing the data to be compared. I also think that the study protocol and design should be similar, not necessarily the same, because for this purpose I was looking for unique study designs, but comparable in that maybe they take place over the same amount of time, maybe within the same type of environment, that sort of thing. And then standardizing compliance protocols. So for these studies, compliance at the end may have involved a number of things. So for example, with study 1, it was if you did the food frequency survey versus in study 2, it was if you turned in the accelerometer and then actual completing a food log and sets of things like that. And that was it for my presentation. I really enjoyed this experience, and it is something that I hope to be able to continue to work on in the future. Thank you.